Art Garfunkel possessed the most crystalline voice in music history, but it was nearly destroyed by a single piece of lobster. In 2010, a simple dinner mistake led to a violent choking fit that didn't just ruin a meal, it paralyzed his vocal cords and silenced him for years. This is the story of how the man who sang the sound of silence actually lived it. To understand the gravity of what happened at that dinner table, you have to understand what Art Garfunkel's voice meant to the world. It wasn't just a singing voice, it was a cultural monument. His pure, angelic tenor was the emotional anchor of Simon and Garfunkel, providing the soaring, ethereal harmonies that elevated Paul Simon's poetic songwriting into something transcendent. When you listen to the climax of Bridge Over Troubled Water, you aren't just listening to notes on a scale, you are listening to a masterclass in vocal control, a fragile yet incredibly powerful human instrument operating at the absolute peak of its capabilities. It was a voice that seemed almost divine, untouched by the grit and roughness of everyday life. Yet, the physical mechanism that produced this heavenly sound was as fragile as any other part of the human anatomy. And in a cruel twist of fate, the instrument that had captivated millions of people across the globe was brought to its knees, not by a terminal disease or a tragic accident, but by a mundane, everyday hazard that any of us could encounter during a quiet dinner. The human voice is a highly specialized biological instrument. While a guitarist can swap out a broken string and a pianist can tune a sticking key, a vocalist has only one set of vocal folds. These delicate bands of muscle tissue, located in the larynx, must vibrate thousands of times per minute with perfect symmetry to produce a clear, resonant tone. For decades, Art Garfunkel protected this instrument, viewing his voice as a lucky rabbit's foot that he had carried since the age of 5. He had built his entire identity around it. Every time he entered a room of strangers, he would hum quietly to himself, using his voice as a defensive shield against his own insecurities. But by the time 2010 arrived, the singer was facing a crossroads. His relationship with his longtime partner, Paul Simon, had always been notoriously turbulent. Decades of creative differences, breakups, and public feuds had kept them apart for long stretches. But in early 2010, there was a glimmer of hope. The duo had agreed to embark on a massive, highly anticipated 13-date arena tour. Fans were ecstatic, buying up tickets within minutes, eager to witness what many believed would be the final, definitive reunion of the greatest folk rock duo in history. The stakes could not have been higher, and the pressure on both men was immense. Art Garfunkel needed his voice to be absolutely flawless. But the tragedy of this moment wasn't just that a legendary singer was about to lose his voice to a freak accident. It was the terrifying secret he would try to hide once it happened. With a multi-million-dollar reunion tour already booked and sold out, Garfunkel would make a desperate, high-stakes gamble. Instead of canceling the tour immediately and admitting his vulnerability, he chose to keep his condition a secret and force his damaged vocal cords to perform on one of the biggest stages in the world. This high-stakes gamble would lead to a public disaster that almost ruined his career forever. But to understand how he reached that desperate point of no return, we have to look at the fateful night. Everything fell apart. It was against this high-stakes backdrop that Art Garfunkel sat down for dinner at the famous Palm restaurant in New York City in January 2010. It was supposed to be a relaxed, celebratory meal. He ordered lobster, a classic choice. But as he was eating, a simple, split-second lapse in swallowing occurred. A chunk of lobster slipped down the wrong way, entering his airway. Instantly, his body's survival instincts kicked in, triggering a violent, desperate coughing fit. Choking is an incredibly traumatic experience for the body. The throat muscles spasm, the chest constricts, and the vocal cords slam shut in a frantic effort to prevent foreign material from entering the lungs. Garfunkel later described this choking experience as a terrifying, near-death experience. He coughed with extreme violent force to dislodge the lobster. While he successfully cleared his throat and survived the immediate danger, the physical trauma of that intense coughing fit had done silent, catastrophic damage deep within his larynx. A few days after the lobster incident, Garfunkel began to notice that something was seriously wrong. It started with a subtle, unnerving numbness in his throat. When he tried to speak, his voice felt stiff. When he tried to sing, the effortless control he had enjoyed for over 60 years was gone. Concerned, he visited a laryngologist who inserted a small camera down his nose and into his throat to inspect his vocal apparatus. The diagnosis was devastating: vocal cord paresis. This meant that one of his vocal folds had become partially paralyzed. The doctor pointed out that one cord was significantly stiffer and fatter than the other, preventing them from closing and vibrating together symmetrically. To understand why this was so catastrophic, we have to look at how vocal cord paresis affects a singer. First, there is the complete loss of the mid-range. Garfunkel could still squeak out some high notes and growl out some low notes, but the middle of his vocal register, the sweet spot where his legendary harmonies lived, was completely dead. Second, this condition creates immense physical strain. When one vocal cord is paralyzed or weakened, the healthy cord has to work twice as hard to meet it, leading to extreme muscle tension and further irritation. Third, there was the profound psychological toll. For an artist who defined his entire existence by his ability to produce beautiful sound, this diagnosis was equivalent to a sudden, unexplained loss of a limb. He was plunged into a deep depression, wondering if his lifelong companion, his voice, was gone forever. In April 2010, despite the medical warning signs, Simon and Garfunkel took the stage at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. This was supposed to be the grand kickoff of their highly publicized reunion. Thousands of fans packed the venue, buzzing with anticipation. But the moment Art Garfunkel opened his mouth, the illusion shattered. The pristine, soaring tenor that people had paid hundreds of dollars to hear was completely absent. In its place was a weak, airy, and deeply erratic sound. He couldn't sustain his notes, and his pitch wavered constantly. He felt completely exposed and terrified on stage. Garfunkel later recalled that he was forced to lean heavily on Paul Simon and the pure affection of the crowd just to get through the set. It was a humiliating experience for a perfectionist who had always taken immense pride in his vocal precision. Following this public disaster, the reality of the situation could no longer be ignored. On June 17, 2010, the duo officially canceled the entire tour indefinitely. The realization hit Garfunkel like a physical blow. He had to stop singing completely. The silence was absolute. But why did a simple choking fit cause such long-lasting paralysis? The answer lies in a combination of physical trauma and lifestyle factors. While the violent coughing fit from the lobster incident was the immediate trigger that damaged the laryngeal nerves and vocal tissue, doctors pointed out that Garfunkel's vocal cords were already highly vulnerable. For years, he had been a heavy smoker, inhaling both tobacco and marijuana. The chronic heat and chemical irritants from smoking had kept his vocal folds in a state of constant, low-grade inflammation. When the acute trauma of the choking fit occurred, his irritated, thinned-out vocal tissues simply couldn't absorb the shock. The nerve pathways that controlled his vocal cords were shut down by the extreme swelling and irritation, resulting in a prolonged state of paresis that doctors feared might be permanent. Faced with the very real possibility of never singing again, Garfunkel had to completely reinvent his relationship with his voice. The recovery process was not a matter of quick surgeries or magic pills. It required a grueling, years-long commitment to patience and physical therapy. The first and most difficult step was absolute vocal rest. For nearly a year, Garfunkel stopped singing entirely and strictly limited his speaking. He had to accept that any attempt to force the voice would only exacerbate the nerve damage and lead to permanent scarring of the vocal tissues. Once his vocal cords had rested enough for the swelling to subside, he began the slow, delicate process of rebuilding his voice from scratch. This therapy was highly unconventional. Garfunkel did not spend hours in clinical offices doing scales. Instead, he took to the streets. He believed that singing was fundamentally connected to the lungs, and the lungs were connected to physical movement. He began walking miles and miles every day, using cardiovascular exercise to rebuild his breath support and diaphragm strength. While walking, he would wear a goofy hat to avoid being recognized and put on his iPod, playing tracks by James Taylor and Stephen Bishop. He would walk through public parks and down city streets, slowly humming and singing along to the music, gradually raising his volume as his vocal cords regained their strength. He called this his less is more approach. He had to relearn how to construct a performance, using subtle phrasing and emotional delivery to compensate for the physical limitations of his healing cords. He also established strict boundaries to protect his recovering instrument. He began treating the telephone as the ultimate enemy of the voice, avoiding long phone conversations because they forced him to use an unnatural, unsupportive speaking pitch that strained his larynx. Garfunkel's experience is part of a broader, tragic pattern in the music industry, where world-class vocalists find themselves at the mercy of their own physiology. We often treat great singers as if they are superhuman, but their vocal folds are incredibly delicate strips of muscle and membrane, measuring no longer than the width of a thumbnail. When we look at other vocal tragedies, such as Julie Andrews, who permanently lost her singing voice after a botched surgery to remove non-cancerous nodules, or Adele and Sam Smith, who suffered severe vocal hemorrhages due to overuse, we see how easily a career can be derailed. But what makes Garfunkel's case so unique is the mundane nature of the trigger. While most singers damage their voices through chronic overuse, poor technique, or relentless touring schedules, Garfunkel's primary catalyst was a simple culinary mishap. It serves as a stark reminder that the human voice is deeply integrated into our overall physical health. A sudden spasm, a violent cough, or a minor nerve irritation can instantly silence an icon. It highlights the profound vulnerability of the human instrument, which is constantly exposed to the hazards of daily life. It took 4 long, painful years, but by late 2013, the patience paid off. Art Garfunkel slowly returned to the stage, starting with low-key, intimate shows before embarking on a full tour in 2014. His voice was not exactly the same as it had been in 1970. It carried a slightly deeper, more weathered quality. But the angelic clarity and emotional resonance had returned. He had beaten the paralysis. Looking back on the ordeal, Garfunkel expressed a profound sense of gratitude, stating that he had grown through the adversity and developed a new appreciation for the sheer joy of singing. He had lived through the sound of silence and emerged on the other side with his artistic soul intact. But while Garfunkel managed to rescue his voice from the brink of destruction, other legendary musicians were not so lucky. In fact, some of the most famous songs in history were altered forever by sudden, mysterious physical transformations that the artist tried desperately to hide from the public. To understand how another iconic vocalist had their signature sound completely rewritten by a hidden medical crisis, click on the video on your screen right now and discover the shocking truth behind the music.